Let's just continue on with 6.5, where we're rationalizing. Oops, I forgot to move my microphone. Here we go. Now we're rationalizing. And what's super important is that when you simplify, you're only allowed to simplify if you can divide top and bottom by the same number. The issue that I come into is students want to just subtract off things. I'm trying to think of a better way of explaining it. Because every time I teach this, somebody does it wrong. Really what's happening, though, let me show you what's really happening, because a lot of students just get into this habit, is you're rewriting 18 in factored form. So maybe what I need to do is break 18 down, 9 and 2, 3 and 3. I know we've been doing this for ages, and you might rewrite as 2 times 3 times 3. Notice it's all multiplication. There's no addition or subtraction in there. Same thing with 12. I'm breaking down 12, maybe just 4 and 3, and then 2 and 2. And then you might rewrite this as 2 times 3 times, well, probably 2 times 2 times 3 if I'm heeding my own advice, just from least to greatest. And what happens is you can divide top and bottom by 2. Each one of those reduced down to 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And your best answer is 3/2. Now, some of you might be sitting there and saying, well, I knew that at the beginning because 18 divided by 6 is 3. As long as I do 12 divided by 6 as well is 2. Okay, the point I'm trying to make, though, is students don't realize that you can only cancel things out when it's multiplication. So if we look at exercise B, we need to write it as the product of two things. So we have to factor, which is why we spend so much time early in the unit or earlier in the year practicing factoring. Now the top is what you may recall the difference of squares. And if you didn't learn this before, you will struggle. I don't have any other advice for you, but x times x is x squared. 3 times 3 is 9. To make it -9, make 1 plus, make 1 minus. Now the bottom, let me do a different color, is just the greatest common factor, and you can pull a 2 in front in x plus 3. So what I'm trying to emphasize, the same emphasis I had on letter A here, is that we can multiply. And I don't know what x plus 3 is, but I do know it's exactly the same on top and bottom with multiplication, and they will cancel. And so your best answer is simply x minus 3 all over 2. And you can verify that that's correct with the calculator. Now the calculator won't do the math for you. That's where we left off on the previous problem, but I could rewrite this as x squared minus 9 over 2x plus 6, and then make a second equation that looks almost the same. It's going to be x minus 3 over 2. So that the original problem with my answer, and watch closely, when I hit the graph, you'll see the blue curve and then be covered up by the red curve. Now there is a subtle difference if I look at the table, is the blue curve had an error at -3, whereas the red curve did not. And we can get more into that in a little bit later. So what's important, though, is we only can factor and cancel out the factors, not individual numbers. So as we look at the next one, you may remember some of these rules, but they're just monomials, where we divide the coefficients and we subtract exponents. And I hope you remember this. I believe we did this in Unit 4. That 6 divided by 3 is 2. 8 is bigger than 5, so there's more x's on bottom, and 8 minus 5 is 3. But there's more y's on top. 6 minus 3 is 3. Well, 20 divided by 4 is 5. Since 20 is bigger, that goes on top. 10 is bigger than 2. When you subtract 10 minus 2 is 8. And then y to the 8th on that one. And this is all acceptable because we're multiplying. You know, multiply, 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 multiply. So same thing in the next one. 21 divided by 7 is 3. 5 is bigger than 3, so more x's on bottom. 5 minus 3 is 2. And then there's 7 more y's on bottom. Now what's important on this one is the previous one, you don't have to put divided by 1, but this one you do have to have a 1 on top. So there's a big difference between 1 divided by something and something divided by 1. Just think about if you had a bunch of money divided amongst one person versus if you have $1 to split amongst a bunch of people. There's a huge difference there. So in the next one, again, now this one I probably shouldn't say to divide the coefficients. I should say reduce the coefficients. And the top and bottom, those coefficients are both divisible by 5. So if I was trying to work it out that way, 10 divided by 5 is 2 on top. 15 divided by 5 is 3 on bottom. So as you look at a few options are bad options. There's more x's on top. 6 minus 2 is 4. And there's more y's on bottom. 6 minus 3 is 3. Which looks like that would be this answer. Option 3. There we go. Okay, so how do we get a little bit more tricky? How do we get into Algebra 2 is to get into more complex things. But again, it's the idea of factoring. And if we look at the top, we have factors of 14 that add to be 5. And I really hope you remember this section. So that would be x plus 7, x minus 2. And on bottom, we have another difference of squares. X times x is x squared. 2 times 2 is 4. To make a negative 4, make 1 plus, make 1 minus. And the identical terms cancel, and what's not identical is your final answer. So again, let's look at the next one. We again have a difference of squares on top. Notice the square numbers, because the bottom is not a difference of squares. On top, to get 4x squared is 2x times 2x. To get 1 is 1 times 1. Just make 1 plus, make 1 minus. Now the bottom, all it has is a greatest common factor. 5 goes into both of those. And 5 times 2 gives you 10. And 5 times 1 gives you 5. Make it negative. And just like before, the identical factors cancel. And then this other piece is the final answer. I should probably write it out. That we would write it this way, 2x plus 1 over 5. And then what I like about the next one is it reminds you on how to slide and divide. And again, if you didn't learn this earlier in this Algebra 2, you might struggle. So remember, 3 times 8 is 24. Factors of 24 that add to be 14 are 12 and 2. But then you have to remember the divide part. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, but don't forget to slide back. What am I talking about there? Is we have x plus 4, the reduced version, but the 2/3 didn't divide, so you have to slide that 3 back, 3x plus 2. Notice the difference of squares on bottom again. X plus 4, x minus 4. And hopefully there's enough in this lesson that you'll pick up on this quickly, and there's your final answer. 3x plus 2, let me write it, over x minus 4. So it's definitely getting trickier, and I do apologize if I'm making this seem a lot easier. With this next one, we have just a special type of factoring when we have, and just think about it for a second. What's going to happen? I don't know if I just need to explain it to you or just show you a few examples, and that's what they have you doing here. But notice one's 9 minus 6 and then 6 minus 9. So they switch the order around. X minus y, y minus x. But think about it. 9 minus 6 would be 3. 6 minus 9 is the negative of that. And something divided by the negative option would be negative 1. Let's see if that keeps working. 12. Negative 12, yeah, that's going to be negative 1. Do you think it'll always work? Yes, it does. Now let me just give you one extra step for anybody that's interested. The reason why it always works is because what you could actually do, I'm going to leave the top alone, is you could factor out a negative on the bottom, and when you factor out a negative, A becomes positive, and B becomes the negative, and you have the identical thing on top and bottom. Just 1 divided by -1 is -1. And I just have a couple more exercises to try to get you on board with that. Here's another one that's the same, GCF on top. I'm going to use green. I haven't used green in a while. So 2 can be factored on top. And on bottom, difference of squares, 5 minus x, whoops, and then 5 plus x. And what they're trying to get you to realize then is, let's use red again, that this thing and this thing are almost the same, except they're switched. So that's going to be like a -1. So what we have on top is 2 times -1 over 5 plus x. And not trying to confuse anybody, because there's two things. 2 times -1 is -2, and you don't have to write 5 plus x. You can switch that order around. 5 plus x is the same thing as x plus 5. That's why option 1 is correct. And if you're having questions, feel free to write them down and bring them to class, because it might take you a while before you really get it. Because on the next one, again, we have the factor on top. What are factors of 9 that add to be -6? It'll be -3 and -3. Same thing on bottom, except we have a greatest common factor. We can factor out a 6 out of that. And we have 3 minus x. Double check my arithmetic. And again, x minus 3 and 3 minus... You can actually choose either one on top. I just chose the first one I saw. They're switched. So what that means is we have a -1. So they don't quite cancel out. But they're really close to canceling out. And so as you look at your options, option 3 is a bad one. But the reason why option 1 again is not the right one, sorry about that. Just think about it. If you distribute the negative into the problem, you get a -x. That's why I went to that one first. But it's actually option 4, because -1 times -3 is +3. So hopefully that's the only mistake I've made, and I caught it quickly. But you should be ready for the homework now.